Welcome everybody to the Indie Plus panel here. We're going to be talking about self-publishing today in the RPG industry, so we're pretty excited about this. I want to kind of go around real quick and everybody introduce yourselves. So I will go first. I'm Eloy Lasanta. I'm actually the host of the panel as well as one of the guests. And I am the owner and proprietor, operator, whatever you want to call it, of Third Eye Games, and I have been self-publishing since 2008. I have self-published several things as well as help other people publish their games. Only really a couple, but I've helped a little bit here and there, getting people to self-publish as well. So I feel like I have a lot to kind of talk about on this topic. And I've also brought on 3 of my friends who will introduce themselves as well. Liz, why don't you go first?
Hi everyone, I'm Liz. I am the owner of Angry Hamster Publishing. I am new to the self-publishing world, so I'll give you guys a little bit of an insight on that. For those who've been doing it for years who can't remember the terrifying first year, I'm here to remind them of it.
Emily?
Okay. I'm Emily Caraboss. I publish under the Black and Green imprint, which is my own publishing company, and I'm on the longer end of the spectrum, I guess. But I started in 2005, and remember those horror days, and I'm glad to relive them with you, Liz.
All right, and Brandon?
My name is Brandon Ayton. I'm one of the owners of Wet Ink Games. I'm a longtime industry freelancer, and yes, this is also my first full year in the self-publishing realm. And I'm one of those people that Eloy has helped along the way. A lot of tips and advice, and a lot of great bits of information from Independent Game Developers Network. So. Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to provide some good insight.
Yeah, and it might seem like it's an accident that we ended up with two kind of newbies and 2 kind of veterans, but it wasn't. It was very purposeful.
Yeah, see what you did there.
Yeah. So I guess honestly, the first question here would be, let's go ahead and try and define the term self-publishing. All right. Let's go with Emily first. Like, when you think of self-publishing, what is the first thing that you think of?
Well, I think the most important thing to me, at least for my work, is that I have full control over what happens to the product. I get to make the mistakes and have the glory and the horror happen, but from the beginning to the end, I make the decisions about the writing, how the editing happens, the illustration, and it comes with difficulties of having to come the skill and the money yourself, but the good part for me is that I really, really enjoy the process of creation of these games and then sharing them with other people. And although I've started doing some freelance recently, and I've started doing development with other folks in other companies, I find that that's enjoyable, but it's not the most satisfying for me. And also, I think it's a broader term these days. There's a lot of different ways that people can publish on their own with greater and lesser collaboration with other people.
Very cool.
Is that all? Okay.
Brandon, what do you think when you think self-publishing?
Initially, before I really dove into it, I was one of those people that kind of had a standoffish view of self-publishing. I kind of looked at it from the perspective of, oh well, a self-published book is something that you couldn't really farm out to a publishing company or a traditional gaming company, and I have especially over the past like 3 or 4 years found that cannot be further from the truth. Some of the best talents in the industry right now are currently self-published or got their start in self-publishing, and it's so that was where I really came from. I got my start from established companies, and so that's really where I coming from. And now, I look at just how much work goes into it. It has to be a passion project for the most part. I look at self-publishing as just the entire process, understanding the art that you want, understanding the stories that you want to tell, the games that you want people to enjoy, and if people didn't love it, then it wouldn't get done.
Very cool. Liz, what do you think?
Well, for me, not to echo too much what Emily and Brendan had already very well said, but like for me, self-publishing was kind of a means to an end. I had written something and I wanted it out there, and it was pretty much its own work. Basically, it was its own complete system, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put it out there and see if it takes, and put the work in. And that's initially why I self-published, and I guess for me that is in its core essence what self-publishing is. It's that freedom to have your creative idea out there and the ability to share it with other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. And yeah, I mean it's almost kind of like self-publishing is almost like the same way as saying kind of indie publishing, or trying doing things yourself. It is very much kind of I'm kind of along the same lines of Emily, where it's very much about having control of the product, and a lot of that is creative control, but also some people some people have a knack for the business side of it as well. Not everybody does, obviously, but I'd like to think that I have at least a moderate grasp on what it is to be a publisher nowadays, because it's completely different now than it used to be.
And keeps changing.
And keeps changing. Like, I can't wait till what happens next year. I guess a follow-up question then, kind of bouncing off what we were just saying, like with the control and all of that. Like, what makes a self-published product different than, say, a vanity-published product? Liz, what do you think?
A vanity published? What do you mean? Sorry.
Well, usually whenever somebody uses the term a vanity published product, it's usually because, like, the way that I've always looked at it, it's always like nobody else wanted to publish it, so I published it myself.
Right. Right. Okay. I see what you're saying. Well, I think what's important about self-publishing versus a vanity published piece is that I think when you start self-publishing, a very big part of self-publishing is marketing and making sure that you have an audience for your work. And at one point, when you start building your audience and you start getting fans and people who are enjoying your game system because of the feedback that they're giving you, because of the games you've played, at one point it becomes almost a collaborative process. I mean, of course, you have the control, you have the final say over everything, but I mean, the experience and the feedback that you get from your community and from the people you're working with is invaluable. And I think that really puts self-publishing apart from a vanity project because basically it's almost a communal work at the end of it. So that's what I would say.
Very good answer. And honestly, it's nowadays you don't even really hear the term vanity published anymore all that much, because it used to be self-published was vanity published. You couldn't get a big publishing place to publish you, so you published it yourself. So then people would be like, oh, so why do you think your idea is so great? It's like, do you have anything to add on that, Emily?
I definitely agree, and I think partly it's what you're saying about things having changed. It used to be that there was basically one channel for books and games, or many similar channels to get at that were high scale and high capital investment. And now there's so many different ways that it gives a lot of different people the avenue and the voice to share their creative project. And that does mean that there's a lot of what is it, $1.99, My Boyfriend's a Vampire novels out there in the world. But the world probably needed more. There weren't enough. And what that means, too, is that there's so many people that can do what they feel inside and share it, like Liz was saying, that you get a lot of different voices, and you get a lot of unique voices. And the thing that we have going for us as independent publishers, or oftentimes, is that since we're taking risks that are our scale, we're an individual person, maybe a couple of people working together, we can take big risks because we're not paying 50 people. We're not investing thousands and thousands of dollars. We can incrementally grow, and I'm sure we'll talk about Kickstarter and all the crowdsourcing that goes on tonight. But that also makes this beautiful collaboration that Liz was talking about have so many different facets. And I don't know, it's terrifying, but we also luck out because with role-playing games, you have to have someone else interact with your product in order for it to go anywhere. A book, it's a very sort of solo thing. They might read it, they might not, whatever. It might just sit on their shelf. But if your game doesn't get played by other people, then it's probably not going to go too far. And so somebody else has to get excited about it. And with crowdsourcing, they can actually put money behind that. So it's just this whole different world. It really is a different printing, which where I think of, with books where somebody wrote their poems and they spent $10,000 and then they give. We can do that. We can absolutely pay a copy and send it to all our friends. But there's this really interesting networking that goes on that really raises it above and beyond.
Brandon, have anything to add?
Well, really, one of the things that was asked about, like my first project was, how is this going to be differentiated from a vanity project, and that was one of the things that I had to wrestle with. Like, is this really a vanity project, or would this be would there be other people who are interested in this? And I made sure that I talked to like almost all of my contacts that I had in the industry, and realized that I had something that seemed a little special, and at that point was able to understand that, okay, no, this is something that I can pursue and probably should pursue. And that was also a little bit of the hesitation, overcoming the hesitation as a first-time developer, and just trying to make sure that that putting myself out there for the first time wasn't really going to be too scary. It was just the right amount of terrifying.
I mean, it's scary. It's scary now. What am I on? Like my 1,000th thing. But it's still
Right.
scary. Like every time, though. It's like scary every time.
Yeah, like terrifying.
It really is. All right, so I think that's all the questions that I have. I think we've established a good baseline of what self-publishing is. Earlier in the day, I actually posted some questions from people in my social feeds and whatnot, and I noticed that we have a couple of people actually watching this live. So feel free to also throw some questions into the Q&A, which is activated if you guys want to ask something. Otherwise, I'm going to go off of the previously constructed list of questions. And I think, honestly, the first one that we're going to go ahead and do is, how does the time spent on your publishing and income it produces compare to a minimum wage job? I think that's a really good question. Brandon, take that one first.
Well, man, it would, for me, where I am, it would be pennies, absolute pennies on the dollar. Like, I would love more than anything to be able to do this as my full-time job. And a few years ago, when I saw that Eloy finally took that leap and was able to do that, I was so proud and also really envious of knowing someone, having a friend in the industry that was able to do that, make that leap from beginning to end, all the way through, and taking something that they really loved and turning it into their career. And actually, I'm a project manager for a Fortune 100 company, and that was one of the things that in my annual review this year, my boss asked, hey, what's your 5-year plan? How can I help you get to the point where you want to be? And I looked at her and told her, well, in 5 years, I hope to be writing enough that I don't have to come in here. And it kind of took her back. She had to take a step back. But she was like, well, that's great. You actually have a goal and you have a passion. And I can't tell you how many people I ask that question and they just give me a standard answer, And so she was pretty appreciative of that honesty. And so, yeah, as it compares to a minimum wage job, especially early on, it's gonna be pretty rough. And but with all the freelancing that's out there, if you can put yourself out there, and I mean, you can make some okay money, but it's not one of those things that I would say, all right, go on and quit your job right now and run right into it.
Liz, what's your response to that question?
Time spent, sorry, time spent versus how much money you make. It's definitely there's definitely no comparison.
Right.
Brendan covered it. You definitely do this because you love it, and it's something that you really enjoy. I must say that, I mean, okay, money is nice. And I'll be very, very happy when I have my books out and I can start selling excess books and things like that. But I think one of the biggest things that you get out of this isn't in monetary value, but just in, peace of mind kind of things, and the fact that today I spend half of my day thinking about mermaids, and I could write that as working hours, and I previously could not do that. And that just brings me so much joy. And of course, yeah, maybe I'm making 1 cent an hour doing that, but it's 1 cent an hour thinking about mermaids and not doing some administrative work. So.
Right.
Yeah. Emily?
Let's see. I'll look at it from the other angle. Say I had a minimum wage job that I was doing in addition to a day job, or as my full-time job. I wouldn't have the energy, I think, to be creative. I wouldn't have the fulfillment that I get from working on these projects. Or maybe I'd be working my day job and then doing some hobby like playing tennis or, singing at karaoke, whatever it is. And then I wouldn't have some money coming in, and I wouldn't have the experiences that I've had through gaming, like meeting folks like you and getting to talk with people all over the world. The money that I've made through gaming has definitely funded going to conventions and being able to go even to other countries sometimes and get to see totally different ways of living and gaming and I don't know, drinking all night. There's a lot of enrichment that happens from it. So I think that comparing the experience of what a minimum wage job would offer really doesn't balance in the slightest. I really love this, but yeah, absolutely. I'm not bringing home bank. It's a side business for me, and that's actually one of the tipping points for me that I come back to again and again as I see peers do very, very well. There are some very, very financially successful independent publishers, and it's really inspiring to see them. And then it's also challenging because I'm like, well, what am I doing wrong?
No, you're right. I
mean, and I have to come back to my just one last thing about that. I always have to come back to my center and say, so why am I doing this? What is it about this endeavor that draws me again and again? And for me, it's about the art. It's about having this mode of expression that's totally different from anything else in the world, at least as far as I can see. What we do is just to step to the side and having a community. That's incredible. That's worth every penny, every moment.
I would definitely agree. From my end, when I actually started publishing, which was, like I said, in 2008, I actually was working. I did technical support. I did like customer service, and I would take phone calls. And actually designed my first game like in between phone calls. And for years, like any money that I made from the games that I did, I put right back into the promotion and the art, and right back into the business, which is what any small business owner will tell you you need to do for the first few years anyway. So I did that for about 2 years, and then eventually I started making enough that it didn't bring in a lot of money, but it paid for me to go to a couple conventions a year. And so then it was like, cool. So now I get to go around and visit places, and it's pretty nice too. Until I got to the point where me and my wife was doing very well at her job. My publishing was doing very well as well. So we were able to kind of make financial stuff work for me to go ahead and do that. Like, do I make as much as I did when I did technical support? Not even close. Because I had been there for years, and I was getting paid quite a bit to be there. But am I happier nowadays? Oh yes, so much happier. Because that's
now
what
you only have to deal with stupid questions from me.
exactly. But no, I mean, so it's an interesting question. So thank you for that question.
Yeah.
I guess then let's go with this one will probably be a quick one. How do you arrange your release schedule? Let's go with Liz first on this one.
With great difficulty. Basically, I based it around, for me, I mainly based my release schedule around the art that I needed, because everything else was primarily done besides for the editing, and I knew that the editing could be done while the rest of the art was going to be done. So basically, I asked the artist how much time they needed, and I scheduled in for that. And eventually, because I was very lucky with my Kickstarter, some stretch goals came in, which meant that my release schedule got delayed by a month. But for me, that's a pretty acceptable delay. A month isn't that bad. Before this, I was a shoe buyer for fashion. So I was very used to working with designers and artists and things like that, and having to do timelines. So I built myself a buffer in already. And of course, the stretch goal ate through the buffer. There's nothing like a Kickstarter to prove to you that you know nothing about timelines, and I thought I was the master of timelines. But luckily, I had that buffer built in about a month or two, so that my release schedule didn't get delayed even more. The buffer is very important.
Very cool. Emily?
For a while, when I started out, I was lucky enough to have picked games that took about a year or two to develop, so I was able to put out just a game every year, and my production schedule was aligned with Gen Con for many years, because I was part of a community centered around a forum, an online forum called The Forge, and we every year had a booth, and so it made it really nice. There was a nice repetitious cycle. I could count on it, and it was affordable, so I could do that. But after a while, what I found was that I had so many different projects that they're all bumping up against one another. That's what I'm dealing with right now. So it's kind of a challenge. It's a wonderful thing, but it's a challenging thing when I've got projects at just far enough that I have to figure out which one rises above. So this year I ended up, I had a project that I've been working on for a long time. My first 3 games were romance themed, and the first one I published was one of those. And I'd been wanting to revise them for the 10-year anniversary. And so I ended up deciding to choose a crowdsourcing or crowdfunding venue to help push me along and make me choose that project over everything else. So I started a Patreon to support it. And now that gives me this very clear timeline, and I'm accountable to other people. And also I get feedback and reinforcement about creating and the hacks and stuff. And it made me formally talk to my artist and my editor, and so it was really helpful at this point to pick and choose between the many projects that I've got on the back burner, to help just say, okay, this one's going to take center stage for right now. So I'm excited about it, and it's going well so far. So so far so good.
So, follow-up question on that. How important is it to have a public timeline versus a private timeline for you?
Hmm. Um, I think for me it's a huge leap to have a public timeline because I've always established private timelines. I don't want to let people down. I don't want to raise expectations that can't be fulfilled. And there's a couple of games that they're hanging out there. I thought I was at a completion point with them, and I didn't go where I wanted it to go. So for me, I've tried to be very cautious about that, and only occasionally say, "Oh well, I'm planning to have this out next year. Maybe it will or won't." But so this is really big, and I wouldn't have done it except that I've been working on this stupid project so long that I had actually done all the revision on the actual text, so I've got like 3/4 of the project done, and then I could commit to these discrete last pieces. But then again, like Liz said, this kind of thing, you never know what's going to happen, so it's good to have extra time in
Oh
there.
yeah.
So I'm glad to have some friends to help.
So, Brandon, how are you arranging your release schedule?
So the the my co-author and actually he's also my brother-in-law. He and I have worked together very well, and we know how long it takes each one of us to tackle certain projects, and we know that there are certain buffers that you have to build in. There are days when you sit down to write and things just don't come as fluidly as they should, or as you're used to. But so understanding the amount of work that you can realistically do in any set time frame is very important. If you're working with anyone else, any other external resources, whether they're artists or you are working with a publisher or a printing house that you've never worked with before, making sure you understand what their timelines are. If you know anyone who's actually used that printer before, or used an artist, or you know what to expect. All of those things really come into play. Those factor in. Like I know that even when that was a learning lesson that I had to have when even launching my Kickstarter, which is going on right now. We launched with a rough version of the cover of our book, and because we were working with an artist that's absolutely phenomenal, but he had something come up in his personal life, and so we had to wait an extra day before our painter could get the pencils. So that was something that was totally unforeseen, and we'd been working with him for about a month up to that point, and then it was just something that we didn't factor in. So when we had set our actual publication date, we wanted to make sure that we factored in all of the time that our artists would need, even including some of our stretch goals. It was mentioned previously that stretch goals kind of bump something out a month. We wanted to make sure that if we reached some of our stretch goals, that we weren't falling into something that could be problematic. But additional publications and things like that you see on a lot of these Kickstarters, they definitely do add time, and may actually extend release dates as well.
Yeah. And I think for my answer, I would say I think part of being self-published is that I don't necessarily have to adhere to strict release schedules, and that's actually something that I quite enjoy about doing it, because I can kind of go where the inspiration is as opposed to what technically needs to get done at that particular moment. And I've skipped entire games that I was working on because I got inspiration for another game, and that's okay, and people understand, and that game came out eventually, but I released a whole other game before it, but I'm also weird with my schedules because I just kind of bounce around, and I have a lot of fun though. So
I have one more thing. You mentioned about the personal schedules.
Mhm.
If you find yourself as being deadline driven, like there are those people that when you're in college, you wait till the night before to write your term paper. If you find yourself being deadline driven, make sure you set your own personal deadlines, even if it's not something that's being governed by someone else, because more or less you'll find things get done more efficiently if that's the case. I know that factored into some of my early writing as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, all right, cool. So next question is, and this is actually kind of a big one because being self-published, you usually don't have a large infrastructure for this sort of thing. But how do you promote and distribute your products being self-published? And we'll go with Emily first.
So let's see. I think one of the most important things that I found makes a difference is to meet people, network, talk, go places, because a huge proportion of what publicity consists of these days isn't about advertising necessarily in the traditional sense. No one's going to read a magazine and see an ad about your game. Maybe they will. There are magazines out there. People will read them. But primarily, the the contacts come from people hearing about it from a friend, reading about it on Google Plus because somebody else played and then posted about how great a time they had, or heard about you running it at a con, and that got them interested in it. So personal contacts are just absolutely critical, and being part of communities, whether they're informal online forum chat groups or more formal groups. I think someone earlier mentioned the Independent Game Developers Network. That's a formal group that is there. That I'm a part of. Several of us. Are we all a part of IGDN?
We are.
Still meeting.
I think Brandon is not.
We will be shortly.
Okay. Well.
We will be
But
shortly.
He's going to be shortly. Yes.
For me, it's been interesting seeing how the indie game community develops. I talked about the Forge before. That was a real center for people who felt very serious and interested in developing their skills as designers. There's a lot of other communities like that, and it's been really neat to see people shift into having more formally governed groups, and I think there's a great place for that, and there's a lot of different ways you can do that, though.
Totally. Liz, what do you think?
Well, for me, social media was just so important because I live in the Netherlands, I live in Europe, and I also wasn't active on any online forums or anything like that. So for me, basically, social media was my way to interact and engage with an audience or find people, basically. And it all started with Twitter, actually, for me, just following people that I thought were cool and interacting with them. I think sometimes what people forget when promoting their work is that they put a lot of stuff out there, and that's not the problem. I see perfect posts, I see you should always use an image, you should always ask a question. There's some basic things for social media that you should always do each time you post. But I think sometimes what people forget with promotion is that once you put something out there, the interactions that you get back, whether that's someone favoriting your tweet or someone giving you a +1 or someone saying, hey, this looks cool, you should always interact back with them, because that's really how I started to form a community in the end around my work without actually meeting anybody in person. Was just through interacting with people in social media and meeting all these cool people who thought what I was doing was cool as well. And that just played such a big role in promoting my work and promoting the book. And to the point where I still have people on social media coming up to me like, hey, when is the book going to be out? Can I still buy it? I heard about it on Twitter. And, that's great. And that just comes from really cool people that I've met promoting and talking about my work because that I had that initial interaction with me.
Very cool. I would also add that there's not any. I mean, some of the more traditional ways of doing it, like magazines and whatnot, like Emily said, it's probably not going to do much work. I dabble in AdWords every so often because AdWords can get your banners and whatnot onto some sites that can get you some clicks. It's not always a guarantee of actually becoming anything, but you can get something. Also, like Facebook ads and stuff like that also help out quite a bit because you're able to kind of, I mean, you have to pay money. That's the sucky part about some ads is that you actually have to pay for it. That's why I like social media because it's all free. But sometimes you can spend some money and actually get some good advertising in there as well. So, I mean, the social media is super duper important, and Liz spoke about that great. Emily spoke about building communities, also very great. You can also go the traditional route. So what do you have to add to that, Brandon?
Really, it's all about, what we found out is it's all about networking and, yes, social media. We right now are really trying to expand that network, expand our social network, and reaching out to pretty much everyone we know. And I know that people on my own personal Facebook connections and Twitter, I bet they're just getting absolutely sick of me, talking about products and promoting products of my friends. But that's another thing that you can make sure you do is there's some quid pro quo where you say, well, you know what, I will, I think you have a great product, and I feel really passionate about my product, and I'll promote mine diligently, and will also help promote yours. Hopefully, you find my product, you find my product appealing, and you would like to do the same. That's great. But I really think if your product speaks for itself, other people will speak for it as well. And don't get me wrong, since I'm relatively new here, I'm taking notes from you guys as well. So.
Can I add something?
Yeah, for sure.
I was thinking about what you said about the more traditional channels. There's two huge ones, or rather, I said people won't read about it in magazines. I'm wrong, actually. It depends on the magazine. Being targeted about where you're putting your ad makes a huge difference. If you put a magazine in, I don't know, your hometown newsletter or something, it's not going to reach the people who want to play your game. But if you put a magazine in a magazine that's targeted at the community that is playing games like yours, or reading stories that are like what your game is like, then you're going to have a warm audience. I think that's the thing. We don't want to just do scattershot ads or outreach to people who aren't going to care, but we can really target that way. And podcasts, man, oh my God, that is like this huge source of wonderful media. Just like Indie Plus does so much great stuff, but there's so many amazing podcasters out there doing like amazing work, and talk about for no money, but for the joy of it. So they're really really great folks to connect with, and thank you all you podcasters. Yay!
Yes, totally.
Yes,
thank you. I actually was just on one yesterday, and I have another one next week. So I mean, there you go. It's definitely, you're right. So I guess, this was actually a question that I got from my Facebook feed, and this will probably be a quick one. But I just kind of want to run it past you. And Liz, I'll let you tackle this one first. What is your thoughts about protecting your intellectual property as a self-publisher versus having somebody who is kind of, has a lawyer like on retainer behind him? What do you think about that?
Well, we've talked a lot about community already, and I've also seen some stuff going by in my Google Plus feed, which I also very much agree with. But basically, I put a lot of stuff out there for people to read over and people to check. A lot of it goes to my backers. They basically have like my entire mechanics section already, and I basically told them, the book isn't released yet. I trust you guys to release, to show your friends what's necessary to play the game. And I know that you're not going to go putting this out there because you love the game as much as I do, or at least I hope you do. And if you don't, well, you know what? I think the mechanics section is pretty cool. So And that's pretty much how I've gone with it. I honestly think the more that's out there is the better. And if people are like me, and I think that definitely goes for the entire roleplay community, you know, everyone posting their shelfies and stuff like that. If you like a gaming system and you read about it, the first thing you're going to go do is buy the first book, and then you're on Drive-Thru RPG, so you might as well buy the companion as well because, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's important, and I guess also, especially when you're first starting out, you know, you show it to people you trust. But at one point, I mean, it can only help promote you. And I am very lucky to not have a case yet where someone's really taken something and done something bad with it. And I don't think that would happen. Too idealistic? I don't know.
Brandon, what do you think?
Sorry, let me come off mute. Well, I do think that the protection of your intellectual property is very important, but I think getting your game or your mechanics or your system or your ideas out there, that's really the first step in the battle. Like, it is getting people aware of your product. I've found that especially with playtesting groups or even people at conventions, so many people are very cool about, we're not going to share this, or we want to make sure that, you know, this stuff doesn't necessarily get out unless I'm going to be playing with a group. But a simple, like, non-disclosure agreement, whether or not it holds up in court or you have a lawyer look at it, something like that, especially with your core playtesting group, really does go a long way into making sure that the proprietary stuff that you don't want to get out doesn't. But having something like a character primer or your mechanic primer or something is something that you see a lot in Kickstarters and a lot of other crowd-funded items, and it really gets people talking about your product. And I think that's really the way to go. At this level, having a lawyer on retainer, I mean, you might know somebody who knows a guy or something like that, but getting solid legal advice and defending your intellectual property can be a quagmire. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, because I've been at conventions, and I've talked to people where I'll be like, oh, you're designing a game, tell me about it, and they'll be like, oh, well, I can't tell you about it because it's a really cool idea, and I'm just like, what? Like, you know, because that's kind of the thing when it comes to creative writing. If I said, write a story about a girl who has a balloon, like, we would all come up with completely different stories about a girl with a balloon because we would all handle that very differently. So telling me an idea of a world where there's a war and stuff like that doesn't, like, if I was to steal your idea, you'd never know it because my implementation of that idea would be completely different than the way that you would do it. You know, so I mean, that's my thought on intellectual property, at least, is that you know, in a lot of cases it really is going to be where saving your idea isn't really worth it in the end. Emily, what do you think?
I also will have to get out to mute. There we go. I think there's a lot of ground that gets covered when you don't worry so much. You know, you take the approach that everybody's kind of wanting to find their own thing, so you can trust that you're working with your peers and your colleagues primarily. And also, you know, it's not Coca-Cola or something. You know, there's not a secret formula that somebody else is trying to crack. And in fact, a lot of the people who are very successful take the other tact and say, okay, here's my thing, run with it. Everybody, do what you want to do. The Apocalypse World engine is a very, very successful and multi-game adapted system. And, you know, Vincent Baker said, this is something that I like, that I'm proud of. Let's make it open source so that other people can take this general system and then do what they want with it. And, you know, like you said, Eloy, people do amazing, totally different things using the same structure but creating something new with that. I guess if you look at other fields that are parallel to ours, there's more fear in them, like video games. There's a tremendous amount of protection of the product in like high-level AAA video games where people have non-disclosure agreements and you can't talk about what you're doing. And there's a lot of R&D that's invested in those games, like thousands, billions of dollars, whatever it is. And I can understand why. But then you end up being in this situation where people are reinventing the wheel over and over again because people don't know how somebody else is doing it, or somebody creates one wheel and they just use that over and over and over again and pound it into the ground. So it's nice that we're in, at least at this stage, maybe it'll be like this forever, but where most of us don't really have too much to fear from other people stealing from each other, and we can instead benefit from each other's experience and gain overall.
Very cool.
Did we lose Brandon?
It looks like we just lost Brandon real quick, but we'll keep trucking along. We only have about another 10 minutes or so. I'm sure he'll pop back in like Liz did. So the next question that we have is it's a simple one. It's, how do you determine how you price your products? Liz, you can go first on that one.
I basically took the industry standard for a hardcover 8.5 by 11 book, full color, and then realized that I wasn't Wizards of the Coast and I needed to make it a bit cheaper. No, but actually I'm very lucky to have a friend who owns a roleplay and wargaming store. So he was able to actually tell me what all the other companies are asking for in terms of pricing for their books, and that actually helped me to price. But I ended up going for the pricing of my book around $15 under the industry standard, which I'm happy with. It makes enough. It'll make me enough profit margin at least to do what Eloy was saying earlier, fund my next project and pay for all the art. So.
What do you think, Emily?
I did something similar with my games. I just sort of took a survey of what was around and placed myself sort of in the middle. And also, I haven't changed my prices in 10 years, which I think is a little crazy. But I think part of that is a reflection that it's fairly arbitrary in some ways what prices things have. Is it a matter of exposure, or if you're a established company, people just know and trust your work, so they'll pay more. And also you have to look at your cost per unit, which can be really hard to calculate sometimes. If you're doing small batch runs, the prices can vary. So I'm trying these days to keep a tighter look at how much my costs are when I produce my books, and be able to make some better judgments about where I should price them. PDFs, I think, are a really tricky thing to price because there's no cost there, essentially. Once you developed it, it's a universal iteration, just printing money, right? But there's a lot of different theories about what is the best price. You want to have a fairly high relatively price for it to show that there's quality there. There's a lot of work that went into it, and so you're taking a good chunk of you're taking up space in the market. Or do you want to go for a fairly low price point? $2.99 I think is one of those golden prices, where if you look at the averages of what people will buy, that there's a big bump up at certain points. So I think it depends on how big you think your market's going to be, what type of consumer you're going to have. If you're looking for a very, very, very large market, if you think you're going to have some contact with the mainstream, if your game, for example, my husband's game Dread was on tabletop that Will Wheaton did recently, and so that was a moment where they had to do some really soul searching. about how to price things to see whether they want to have it be something that would just be easy, dispose, like pick it up, don't think about it, or have it be something that was more of a thought. For me, I think I'm actually in a moment where I'm be doing more research to see what the market there is right now for products that are similar to mine. And hopefully I've got some knowledge now about how much the costs have been, so I can feed that into whatever the calculus is that I do to figure my prices.
Yeah. Well, and from what I learned from my few like small business type things that I researched, it actually did come down to the cost of production of the actual thing, and you want to multiply that times either 5 or 6, I think it was. Especially if you're going into distribution where they're already going to end up cutting it in half. So if you don't end up having a good margin on it, then you're making pennies when you sell it to a store and making tons of money when you sell it directly, so then it makes it not even worth it to sell it in a store. So yeah, so there's that. So yeah, I've always kind of run with that. I've always kind of run with the times 5 or 6. Most of my books are that way. When I sell my core books, usually my core books sell for about 30. They're soft cover, black and white. They sell for 30. And then I sell my source books for 20 because they're usually thinner, but still soft cover, black and white. And that's just, it seems to just kind of have worked for me up to this point, so I just kind of stick with that theme. And then I sell the PDFs for half the amount that I sell the print books for. So my PDFs for core books are 15, my PDFs for source books are 10. People seem to like that pricing, and every so often there's sales where people will pick it up if they didn't like that pricing. They'll pick it up for slightly cheaper. But otherwise it seems to go pretty nicely for me. I think my newest game is the only one that I'm kind of stepping out of my comfort zone with, and I'm making it a hardcover book like from the get-go. So it's always going to be a hardcover book, no soft cover, hardcover option. It's just boom, hardcover. And people are, yeah, so it's more, which means I have to, my margins have to be slightly not as good if I want to try and keep it affordable. So that's just kind of how that works. So we have time for probably one more question. So let's see what's a good question here. Do you remember having one idea about self-publishing that in the end proved to be totally, completely wrong? And we'll let Brandon go since he didn't actually get to answer the last question.
Yeah, sorry, I was having connectivity issues. But yeah, man, only one. That's tough. Well, the fact that I wouldn't be stressed. I thought that going into self-publishing, especially with the first Kickstarter and the first launch, I thought, oh well, I'd been through this enough, as partnered with other creators and other producers, or I've been through the process with games that are going through other full publishing companies. I was like, yeah, this is great. Not gonna be worried about it at all. And then, soon as I hit launch, like nerves through the roof. I've been on edge, beginning to end through this entire process, wanting to know, like, man, what if people don't think this is going to be a good idea? What if people ask questions that I don't have an answer to yet? What if people don't like the mechanics? A lot of the self-doubt. But man, I thought that this was, that I had the reins on it. But again, it's what I mentioned earlier. It's just the right amount and right kind of terrifying that if I didn't feel this way, then I would think that maybe I just didn't have the right kind of or place the right kind of value on my idea or my product. So yeah, I thought self-publishing was going to be a little easier than I thought. Totally and completely wrong.
And again, that doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. When I hit launch on my latest one, it's still same thing. Like, oh my God, my stomach hurts now. Liz, what do you think? The one thing you've learned in self-publishing, or the one thing that you thought was going to be one way and it totally ended up being completely different?
Well, I think I have like a strangely positive one. I
Okay.
thought that I wouldn't like working with people as much as I do. I am a crazy perfectionist control freak. Um, any of my friends will tell you that. Like if I'm hosting a Halloween party, my entire house has to be decorated, and just crazy. And so I thought going into this, I'm like, okay, Liz, you know how you are. You need to relax. You need to chill out. This is going to be one of these cool, hippie, collaborative processes where everyone's just saying things. And you know what I mean? Like, I just had a complete misconception of how awesome it is to work with other people in a creative process. So that was amazing for me to find out. Like, just it's so different than the school projects and even the work projects and every single thing you can think of that makes you want to pull your hair out. When you're working with people who are actually motivated and want to do a creative endeavor, and who are insanely talented, basically, it is really just the best thing. And that was such a positive thing for me to find out that it was so cool.
Very cool. Emily, you got anything to add? What would be your one thing?
I think I don't have. I mean, I'll cheat a little bit. I don't have one thing except that I keep having sort of the same realization over and over again, which end it, and then the landscape changes. At the beginning, I felt like I understood. Oh, okay, so we're just not buying, 10,000, 100 games or 50 games and selling them. And then, Kickstarter comes along, and it's a totally different world, and you have access to huge markets and huge investments, so you can make a totally different kind of product that you would have been able to make in your upstairs attic or whatever. And social media again has completely changed the game as far as who you can reach and who you can connect with and partner with. So I think for me, it is just this over and over again realizing that I'm going to have to keep adapting and learning and understanding the new things that come along. And the great thing is that everything that comes along in some way makes it easier. There's challenges, but all of these are just new tools that have been able to make what we do, if not easier, just more rich and broader, reach more people.
Very cool. I'm going to refrain from my answer since we're running out of time. And actually, the last question is going to be, what's the latest project you're working on, and where can people go and learn more about it? Brandon, you go first.
Working on our first project for Wet Ink Games. It's called Wild Skies Europa Tempest. The Kickstarter right now is live. You can also learn more about it by following Wet Ink Games on Facebook or on Twitter.
Very cool. Emily?
I'm working on revising my romance trilogy, 3 quick games about the human heart, and I have a Patreon that's supporting that process where people can sign on and get hacks and mods that I'm developing. That'll be part of the final game early and get to see development notes as it goes along, and then also get a discount on getting the games that'll be released in February, appropriately enough, since that's a month of romance, so it'll be a 10-year anniversary of romance.
Speaking of release schedules there, I bet that was purposeful.
Definitely.
Liz, what about you?
I am just finishing up my first game. The Kickstarter's already done. It's the Witch role-playing system. You can check out the game at angryhamsterpublishing.com. We're also on Twitter at angryhamsterrpg. And yeah, we'll have the store open soon because the PDF gets released in November.
Ooh, that's close.
Yay.
That's really close. And I love the name of your company, by the way.
Thank you.
And obviously, my latest Kickstarter is for the Ninja Crusade 2nd Edition, which is currently going and goes until November 5th. If you just go to Kickstarter and type in Ninja, it'll get you there. So it's there, and we're about 2/3 of our way there. You can also follow me on Twitter at Third Eye Games. You can go to thirdeyegames.net or .com to find me. There's also Facebook /Third Eye Games. Just type in Third Eye Games, you'll find me. It's pretty easy. But definitely, I want to thank you guys for coming out and being guests here for my very first moderation of an Indie Plus panel. So thank you guys so much for being a part of it. And thank you for everybody who came out and watched it and everybody who's going to watch this after. I don't have like any like cool sign off, and I'll just be like, yeah, you know, Johnny Carson. So, see ya. Thanks everybody for coming, and everybody have a great day. Stopping.
Go Cubs.